So the first book is this book that just came out a couple of weeks ago. And this is a book by David Bentley Hart. It's called All Things Are Full of Gods. And this is a rigorous philosophy book about philosophy of mind. And Hart is a controversial figure. He is an academic philosopher. I think he was recently a visiting professor at Notre Dame, but I don't think he's directly affiliated. The book is published by Yale University Press, and it consists of a dialogue, a kind of an imaginary dialogue between four Greek gods who are talking about philosophy of mind. Each one of the dominant theories of philosophy of mind, namely like the problem of consciousness. How does the brain generate consciousness? Can consciousness be reduced to the brain? These are some of the main areas of focus within contemporary academic philosophy of mind. And if you go, for example, to this long-running conference in Tucson, the Science and Consciousness Conference, you'll see that almost everybody there is a partisan of one of these prevailing theories of mind. We have people like David Chalmers and Thomas Nagel, and this is where a lot of the action is in professional philosophy right now, is philosophy of mind. And there have been many ingenious theories, right, that have been promulgated over the last few years, such as integrated information theory, which I'm not going to try to explain here. It's very technical. But the idea is that as information gets integrated sufficiently, then that creates an interior which creates consciousness. So any way that we can integrate information, we're going to get consciousness out of it. And so Hart takes on school by school, almost philosopher by philosopher, in contemporary philosophy of mind, and makes an extremely powerful critique of every one of them. An alternative nickname for this book could become not all things are full of gods, but all theories are full of shit. Because he really just dismantles them pretty effectively. And his personality comes through in the Greek gods, who are the protagonists of the book. And, they're kind of sniffy. They have that pompous regard for each other that's kind of cute, so it makes it lively reading if you're interested in philosophy. My critique is towards the end. He has this sort of neo-perennialist theology of Advaita Vedanta and Christianity, and it's all kind of meshed together in a way that I think is, maybe I've read his 2013 book, The Experience of God, which was another masterpiece. I got a lot out of that book, but I haven't read everything Hart has written. But from what I have read, his personal philosophy is not very well developed. He kind of throws it out at the end. Maybe some of you are students of Hart and you might disagree with me, but he's not so much a developmental philosopher in the sense that he doesn't, he neo-Darwinian explanations are among the philosophies that come into his crosshairs. But he doesn't talk about the evolution of civilization or the evolution of the noosphere, partially because he's very much a traditionalist, extremely high-powered traditionalist. But nevertheless, what he does add, and what I got a lot out of having read this book pretty intensely over the last few weeks, is that he really illuminates the interior universe in a way that it's extremely clear. In other words, that from his perspective, he quotes Schelling, the German idealist philosopher Schelling, in saying that, I'm going to get the quote right, he says, nature is visible spirit, and spirit is invisible nature. Meaning that it's too narrow to call what Hart is doing idealism, right? Because idealistic philosophy, we haven't get a cartoon version of it. So we have materialist philosophy as everything is matter. And then we have idealist philosophy as everything is mind. And of course, the critique is that leads to solipsism, meaning that it's all in your head. And early versions of idealism like Berkeley, right, for whom the school is named, have been thoroughly refuted. It's sort of dead in the water, that kind of early idealism. But Hart brings a kind of a broadened perspective, what we might call today cosmopsychism, that the universe is in the mind of a superintelligent being, and that nature and empirical reality are real, but they're still, mind is first. One of the things that I got out of his book especially was how, in my 2012 book, Evolution's Purpose, I talk about emergence. And one of the things about developmental philosophy especially is that it's illuminating this structure of evolutionary emergence. From the Big Bang to where we are, all of which is embodied in our bodies. I've talked about that a lot in previous discussions. How the structure of emergence, although it's physical in some ways, is also deeply metaphysical, because it involves not just the objective, but the subjective and the intersubjective as well, right? But that's its own talk. This structure of emergence, wherein something more keeps coming from something less, is one of the, I think, spiritual teachings of evolution. One of the most profound things that we can read off the recent science of the last few decades. And what Hart really makes clear with his powerful arguments is that the idea of strong emergence, that consciousness just emerges out of matter, that's like hand waving. In other words, strong emergence is a kind of magic because there's no explanation for it. And while there's weak emergence, these are all, technical, philosophical distinctions, but even that doesn't get us to consciousness. Really what he's showing is that mind emerges from mind, and that we have mind because we live in a universe of deeper mind that permeates all of reality. And he makes an excellent case for that, not just in his affirmative statements of it, but most powerfully in his devastating critiques of all of the different attempts, trying to stay within the orbit somehow of physicalism, and yet not breaking out of that materialist paradigm. I mean, even people who are still allowing for interiority and allowing that consciousness can't be reduced to matter are still playing the game in terms of the rules of scientific naturalism that we've inherited over the past 300 years, and which I mentioned are still dominant. So I think Hart's book is historically important because it helps do what I mentioned earlier, the two tasks, transcending modernity and transcending postmodernity. And his book definitely helps as part of his whole his whole mission as a philosopher, is to focus on transcending reductionistic physicalism and indeed physicalism of all kinds.